Welcome to this new edition of France in Focus. This week we're turning our Parisian perspective upside down as we take a look at the city's underbelly. Well, to start us on our trip down the rabbit hole, we've come here to Paris's famed catacombs, a kilometre-long network of passageways, galleries and vaulted rooms that spread out under the city's streets. And to tell us more about this, I'm joined by the catacombs curator-in-chief, Sylvie Robin. Sylvie, hello, thank you for being with us. Can you start by telling us about the millions of bones and skulls that we see around us here? Where do they come from?
All these bones come from medieval cemeteries from the centre of Paris. For sanitary reasons, the remains were evacuated just before the revolution of 1789, and that's when this gigantic ossuary was created.
And the galleries under Paris are often considered as a city under the city, but in fact, they are what built Paris.
Yes, these underground galleries are the result of quarries that cover about 800 hectares and from which was extracted a very high-quality rock known as lutetia stone, after Paris's Roman name. It's the stone that was used to build the city, including its greatest monuments, from Notre Dame to the Saint-Jacques Tower on the right bank.
And that's also going to be quite dangerous, isn't it? Because we have these holes under the city.
It certainly was dangerous, and that's why the General Inspection Unit was set up, to keep an eye on the galleries, their pillars and ceilings, and to monitor any cracks.
Now, how long did it take for Parisians and foreigners to become interested in what was happening underground here?
The underground has always been something of a magnet. It has a forbidden quality, and of course it's a great place to hide. However, organised tours of the catacombs only started after a museum was created in 1809. That's when the bones were sorted and stacked into the displays you can see here, and the visits became an instant success.
And there's also a bit of an underground life down here, some contraband, for example?
That's right. At the end of the Middle Ages, smugglers used the underground tunnels to avoid paying at the customs houses. And in a bid to scare off curious Parisians, but also and above all the police, the outlaws invented legends about these quarries, including that of a green monster that haunted the galleries.
Now, there aren't any monsters down here, but in the galleries, there is a culinary delight to Paris. Tell us about the mushrooms that grow in the galleries here.
Once the quarries were no longer used to supply stone, botanists decided to try cultivating mushrooms in the empty galleries. And they quickly found that they had the perfect setup. The temperature down here is stable, it's humid and there's no light. Ideal conditions for a crop that took over a sizable chunk of the underground network and is now known as the champignon de Paris, or the Paris mushroom.
Now, the Paris underground isn't just about skulls and stone. Irrigation is also key. Hidden streams and aqueducts supply the city with high-quality drinking water, while sewers do the rest. Aurore Dupuis and Florence Gaillard take us to the source.
A small structure hiding a great secret. Underneath is a tunnel first constructed some 400 years ago by France's King Louis XIII to bring water to Parisians living on the left bank. It was also meant to supply the fountains of his mother's palace, le Palais du Luxembourg.
Behind this wall is where all the water sources would converge, and then through these openings, the water would enter the aqueduct.
The Romans had already found the fresh water source close to the present airport Orly as early as the 2nd century and constructed a first tunnel leading to the capital. The 13-kilometer Médicis aqueduct follows the same path, and it can be seen in the city of Arcueil.
Here you have 3 aqueducts, the Roman one, the Medici's aqueduct, and above is the Belgrane's Lavanne aqueduct, which is still used to bring drinking water to Paris.
Eugène Belgrand was the engineer in charge of bringing more water to the more than 2 million inhabitants of the capital at the beginning of the 20th century. To do so, he diverted several rivers and built collecting basins. And for wastewater, he designed Paris's famous underground sewers. A water table was also found when the construction of the Grand Opéra started under Napoleon III's reign. The architect Garnier was forced to build an enormous concrete well, which was also used to carry the gigantic stage and fly tower.
Charles Garnier weighed down the main stage, the central building, with a well, just like tanks inside the hull of a ship would, to level off all 3 buildings.
The legend of the underground lake was popularized by Gaston Leroux's Phantom of the Opera. But according to firefighters who dive there every month, no cursed artist has ever been discovered there.
Now, while the underground transport systems of London and Berlin were up and running in the 1860s and 70s, it took 3 more decades for Paris to embrace the subterranean revolution. And Line 1 of the Métropolitain was inaugurated in July 1900. Now, admittedly, the plan had been for that opening to coincide with the Universal Exhibition 3 months earlier. But thankfully, that tardiness was not a sign of things to come, and the metro is now known for its efficiency.
It's 1900, and horses' hooves can be heard on Paris's cobblestone streets. But underground, a mini revolution is taking place. A metro is being built, and the lives of bustling Parisians are about to change.
Before the metro, transport in Paris consisted of omnibuses and tramways that were pulled by horses. So public transport was slow going, and already there were traffic jams. The metro meant Parisians could cross the city in half an hour, whereas before it took 3 times that.
The metro was an immediate success. In 1901, 55 million people jammed into its wooden carriages. A second and a third line were quickly added.
In 1900, the engineers were forward-thinking and did their work very well. For over 100 years later, the stations, even the tiles, remained the same.
Parisians could zip east to west, and getting them from north to south and back was next. But there was the formidable challenge of crossing the River Seine. Work began in 1905.
The construction project was headed into unknown territory. I'd even call it a first worldwide, daring to build a metro line under a river. Even in the UK, they hadn't tried to cross the Thames. The problem was the earth was incredibly muddy and everything would collapse as soon as you began digging. So first they froze the ground to dig, and then they built the stations on spot. Here's the Cité station. And then they'd let it sink slowly down thanks to its own weight as the earth got warmer and turned back into mud.
The metro was a great social equalizer. Rich and poor flocked underground. Some drawn by the novelty, others thrilled to get to work on time. Year by year, decade by decade, into another century, the Paris metro kept growing and changing with the times. Ticket collectors were replaced by turnstiles, and on some lines, the drivers gave way to automated trains. 220 kilometers of metro rails crisscross the French capital, and that number is going to jump in coming years. With the Grand Paris urbanization project, even more Parisians will get to hop on and hop off le métro.
Well, as Paris's colourful metro lines continue to expand, so does the city's underground potential. The focus is currently on the western business district of La Défense. There, in the shallows, authorities are musing over how to best exploit thousands of square metres of unused space, a rare commodity and a real challenge considering the overstretched city above.
Underground passageways that stretch over 45,000 square meters. Slabs of concrete covered in dust, and there's only one sound: trains passing nearby. It's a ghost city right under Europe's biggest business district, La Défense, on Paris's outskirts. Putting a shopping mall here may seem like a crazy idea, but the secret tunnels and rooms that cover 12 kilometers and go 5 stories deep could soon be a bustling commercial center.
Here is what we call the sunken cathedral. Careful you don't bump your head. So you see, it's a huge space with 12-meter-high ceilings. When it was first built, it was meant to be a space for public transport. Today it's left unused.
And this is what it could soon look like. The sunken cathedral could become a nightclub, and the so-called pool room a strawberry plantation. But no matter what, this project is inspiring people who work here.
It'd be great if we could have a couple of places where we could go out after work.
According to this architect, the only solution to keep expanding our cities is to dig and live underground.
If we want to limit the urban sprawl, we have to find new spaces and reorganize the entire city. Some pieces of equipment that were outside will go inside. We have a huge empty space underneath our feet, and in reality it's a gold mine.
Elsewhere around the world, other cities have dug deep. In Montreal, a 33-kilometer-long tunnel was constructed in the 1960s. Meanwhile, the underground of La Défense will welcome its first guests next year.
Well, it's time for us to make our way back above ground. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.